average of 44 hours preparing a costume, but the range was from 1 hour to 450 for a single costume. The most time-intensive costume took an average of 134 hours, ranging from 2 hours to 2,880. I had to wonder if it was a typo. And I asked about the last costume they had made, last time-intensive costume, just because hopefully it would be accurate, more accurate. And that was an average of 47 hours, ranging from under an hour to 1,200 hours. Just think about how many weeks of a full-time job that is.
I feel like there should be applause.
Yes.
That
Does that jive with your experience, these statistics?
Yeah.
is there something that you think that ties cosplayers together? Something psychological that stands out for you guys?
I think especially because most people create their own costumes, the build process, the accidents you'll have, the headache and heartache of shipping a costume, all of those things, if you see someone else in a costume, you can pretty much assume that they've been through those things too. It's like we're old war vets, you know. It's like, oh, TSA broke your costume too. I feel for you. There's like an automatic kinship right away when someone has a costume.
Yeah, I like that. I think there are certainly shared experiences that we sort of like have that nod, like, yes, that's happened to me. My guns didn't arrive when I did. It was very important for me to have my weapons. But as a frank answer to that, as if I can pull off the cosplayer hat and just speak as a psychologist, there's absolutely no evidence that there's anything wrong or anything pathological or symptomatic amongst this large community of folks that cosplay. I know that we've unfortunately had a lot of negative associations in the media, and unfortunately the mainstream just sort of sees that, that one headline, those 2 or 3 people on the news that are wearing the mask. And I mean, you guys out here, these are cosplayers, the folks up here. There's certainly, no sort of commonality as far as any psychological traits. Women who cosplay are not promiscuous. People who cosplay, unless we want to be, if that's the costume we're wearing. There are no behavioral traits, certainly no pathological traits. It's not as if these folks have a tendency towards social anxiety disorder, Asperger's, any developmental problems. So, I just wanted to say for the record, there's just no evidence for that.
Actually, can I just add one more thing, which is I think that one commonality is that cosplayers are courageous. They're actually personally courageous to be public about inhabiting another character. And I think particularly for women who some of the costumes show off women's bodies, and you often get a lot of crap from people in response, that it takes a lot of courage. So that's one commonality that I would say that cosplayers share.
Well, actually, this is very sort of topical, but I know there was somebody running for office recently who was giving a lot of crap about playing World of Warcraft. And it's not cosplay specific, but it does sort of speak to the community. And so I wanted to see what you guys thought about that. And they were really sort of vilified, this woman, for cosplaying and and playing World of Warcraft and some of the things that she said. And I just wanted to see what you guys thought about that.
Yeah, we had an article on this on the Mary Sue. I didn't write this one, but it was overwhelming, the amount of comments we got that were jumping to this woman's defense about how not only does she play World of Warcraft, but she knits, and all of this shows that she's just really dedicated, and it's amazing that because it's something that the general public doesn't really understand, that it would be, well, if she is doing this, then she can't do this, and I think there's obviously far worse things that people running for office, are doing that would, eliminate them from that.
World of Warcraft.
Yeah.
Not the same.
Yeah, I just think it's awful. I saw that and I couldn't believe it. I cosplayed as a World of Warcraft character. Does that make me just ineligible to be a person?
Of course.
It's just ridiculous. It's but again, to me the mainstream is this is my mainstream. So I just pretend that they're not even there. let's just face it.
Let me just finish whipping through some of the results. So here's one of the getting more psychological here. One of our survey questions was why people chose the costume that they did. So I'm going to run through what the choices are. Think of this in your head, okay, and then we'll do a show of hands, and I'll tell you what the data show. So one reason is how you look in the costume. That's how you pick how you look. Some psychological characteristic of the character. Some aspect of the character's history that you relate to or identify with. Some physical characteristic, because it's just material you have on hand, the pragmatic answer. What other members of your group are wearing if you cosplay with others, so you kind of had, your choice was really narrowed. The amount of time that you had available, and the cost of creating it, what money you had available. So okay, everybody okay there? Right? Everyone have their main reason of how they choose? So let me just real quick, okay, show of hands. How you look in a costume is your top reason. Okay? Because of some psychological characteristic. Sorry, I'm a psychologist. Some aspect of the character's history. Yes. Some physical characteristic. Okay. Material on hand. What others in your group are wearing. Amount of time available. And cost. The number one reason. Okay. So what we found, in fact, is that how you look in the costume was the number one reason for the biggest slice of our respondents. And then it was some psychological characteristic and then some aspect of the character's history. So those were really the top three reasons. The cost and the amount of time were not very large. Just so you can compare yourself to our respondents. I figured Batman was going to be, the far and away top character based on comic conventions that I've been to. There were very, very little overlap. Out of 197 respondents, the top ranking common character that people enjoyed cosplaying was Captain Shepard, and that was only 5 people. Number 4 people said Poison Ivy. Yes. And
I think you need to stand up. Come on. Come on.
Okay, great. Great costume. Did you make that?
In part.
Okay, that's fair. And then 3 each for Harley Quinn, for Leia, a version of Leia, any version, Len Kagemeyer, and Wonder Woman. I was shocked. Have you dressed as any of those characters?
For obvious reasons, I've done Poison Ivy, and that goes back to the previous answer you had or question you had, because I didn't have to wear a wig, so it worked very well.
Those are all women, aren't they? Besides, we got promoted to captain, so all right. No, my Harley Quinn costume really just didn't work, so.
Hey, there are gentlemen in groups, so that's no excuse.
I saw a very lovely gentleman play as Wonder Woman today, so.
Why do people cosplay? In the interest of time, I'm just going to tell you what they said. The majority reason was it was fun. And then the second was they liked the character. We're going left to right here. And it was a vehicle for creative expression, which is what we talked about. To exhibit their creation, sort of like being a living museum. Identification with the character, that it was fun to just pretend to be someone else for a while. The acceptance and friendship of the community. A sense of escapism, and then finally the sense of having celebrity status for a brief window in time. But that was the lowest grade. Just really quickly, there's a literature on the psychological effects of wearing a mask. How many people here, including you, have worn a costume that has a mask? Okay. And among you, how many where the mask has pretty much covered your face so you're not identifiable as you? Okay. So I was particularly interested in this. Among our respondents, 60% had previously worn a mask, and of those, only 77% have had their face covered. And when asked if they felt more or less like themselves when masked, most people felt that they, basically it's a little confusing in the graph and you can't see it so well, but they didn't, they kind of felt like themselves, or a little bit more like themselves, right? They didn't feel not like themselves. That was interesting because in the literature, typically when you ask non-cosplayers and they're masked, they report feeling less like themselves. So there's something very interesting going on with cosplayers in particular that I'd love to investigate more. Similarly, when you ask if they feel more or less self-aware, sort of aware of themselves, basically it was the middle thing is the highest bar is in the middle, which means it had no effect, not more, not less. And again, that's interesting because in the literature, people feel less aware, who are not cosplayers, feel less aware. So there's some, again, this is a beginning of, a sort of line of research about figuring out what happens with cosplayers that's different.